Good day, everyone! My name is PJ Tentenly and you are here in The Lee Show. Back! Welcome to the episode 2 of The Lee Show, Learn English Enthusiastically, and for today, we're going to discuss about elements and process of communication. But before that, let us review the lesson that we tackled in the first episode. In the first episode, we talked about communication, its nature, and the functions. We said that communication occurs between two or more people. Communication is a process, and communication is done in three forms: the verbal, the non-verbal, and the visual communication. There are also 6 types of non-verbal communication, which includes the kinesics or the body language, oculesics or the use of the eyes in communication, haptics is the use of the touch, chronemics is the use of time in communication, and we have proxemics as the use of space. And the last one is the vocalics as the use of voice. Now let us move on to the next, elements and process of communication. For grade 11 students, you will see in the module of oral communication that there is an activity called What's In. In the direction, it is instructed that let us check your understanding of the different nature of communication. Write T if the statement is true and F if the statement is false. So we're going to analyze these 5 situations, whether these are true or false. Are you ready now? If you are ready, let us answer the first one. The situation is communication is a two-way process, meaning the communicator expects to get feedback or response from the receiver of the message. What do you think is the answer? Is it true or false? The answer is true, or T. Yes, it is correct. Communication is a two-way process because it involves the sender and the receiver. Alright, the second situation is the barriers do not affect the transmission of message from the sender to the receiver. What do you think is the answer? Is it true or false? The correct answer is false, simply because barriers are considered as the noises in the communication process, as they provide walls and hindrances to the transmission of message from the sender to the receiver. It could be in the forms of emotional barriers, physical, and semantic barriers. Let's move on to the third one. The third one is body language and facial expressions are examples of visual communication. Your answer is it true or false? The correct answer is false, because body language is what we call kinesics and facial expressions are part of what we call oculesics. Both the body language and facial expressions are in the form of non-verbal communication, and it is not visual. For the fourth one, interpersonal communication occurs between 2 or more people. What do you think is the answer? Is it true or false? The correct answer is true. Yes, interpersonal communication involves 2 or more people. The other opposite of the interpersonal communication is what we call the intrapersonal communication, which means that you are having a self-talk or talking to yourself. You are considered as both the sender and the receiver of the message. Okay, for the fifth one, or the last one, we have visually understood topics or interests make people communicate. What do you think is the answer? Is it true or false? The correct answer is true. Yes, because if both the sender and the receiver have the same interests or topics, the communication process will go just fine and we can consider it as no barriers in communication. Now, we hope that you get 5 out of 5 score, but if you didn't, it's just okay. Now, I'm so excited to discuss to you about the next topic for today here in this episode 2 of The Lee Show, which is elements of communication. Now, as you can see, communication process is a continuous and dynamic interaction, both affected by many variables known as the elements of communication. A communication process will not be possible without these elements, and in the typical communication process, we are considering 9 elements. And these are
make it drop, that's some wet ass pussy, now get a bucket and a mop.
The sender, message, encoding, channel, decoding, receiver, feedback, context, and barriers. Again, these are the 9 elements of communication that we're going to talk about for today. For the first element of communication, we have the word sender. The sender is the person conveying the message with the intention of passing information and ideas to others. The sender is sometimes referred to as the speaker. Now, the sender is very vital in the communication process because he starts or nominates the topic, creates thoughts and messages that he or she wants to convey to the receiver. Without the sender, the communication process will not start. Look into the pictures on screen. I have provided 3 examples as part of the sender as the element of communication. In the first one, there is a news anchor. In the second one, there is a teacher. And in the third picture, the girl on the right side is talking to the other girl with the yellow hair. They're all considered as the sender of communication simply because they create the news, ideas, thoughts, and messages to be channeled to the receiver. In the first picture, the news anchor delivers a message to the audience, the teacher explains something to the students, and the girl with red hair is trying to tell something to the girl with a yellow hair. Now, again, they are all considered as sender of the communication process. The second element is what we call the message. This is the subject matter of the communication. This may be in an opinion, attitude, feeling, view, order, or suggestion of the speaker. It is sometimes referred to as the idea or the thought. Now, class, take note that the messages can be in the form of verbal, non-verbal, or visual, depending on how the sender would like to encode the message itself. Now, it leads us to the third one, which is what we call decoding. Remember that encoding is the third element of communication, which means the conversion of subject matter or idea into symbols such as words, actions, or pictures. Class, remember that encoding is the way on how the sender would like to create his or her message in the form of verbal, non-verbal, or visual communication. The sender can create a text message through the use of his or her mobile phone. He can post a status on Facebook, post a video on YouTube or TikTok, or even create images or pictures just to send it to the receiver. Once the message has been encoded, it will go through a channel. Channel is the fourth element of communication, which means that it serves as the medium for sending the required information and ideas. This information is transmitted to the receiver through certain channels which may be either formal or informal. Messages can travel or be transmitted from the sender to the receiver in terms of mobile phones or cell phones, computer, television, telephones, radio, newspapers, magazines, books, even notepads, or post mails. And these are all considered as examples of channel. The person who receives the message or symbol from the communicator tries to convert the same in such a way that he may extract its meaning to this complete understanding. Now, the term understanding or comprehending the message is what we call the decoding. The decoding is such an important part where the receiver creates an interpretation out of the message that is sent to him or her by the sender. The reason why I put an example of a human brain here is that, I will repeat, decoding depends on how the receiver interprets, understands, or comprehends a message. So it could be affected by what we call barrier or noise. The thing is that miscommunication, misinterpretation, and misleading information happens between the flow or transmission of messages between the sender and the receiver. Now, this is what we call the decoding, which leads us to the next element called the receiver. Receiver is the sixth element of communication, which means the recipient of the message and the person who decodes the message. Now, if the sender is what we know, the speaker, the receiver is known as the listener in the communication process. Now, there is an important role portrayed by the listener or the receiver. He or she is the reason why the senders or the speakers create an idea, a thought, or a message to be sent or delivered. So, a receiver is a person too. In the picture, you will see a person delivering a message in front of the audience. Now here, the one who delivers a speech is what we call the sender, and the audience who receives the message or information is what we call the receiver. The seventh element of communication is what we call the feedback. This is the process of ensuring that the receiver has received the message and understood in the same sense as sender meant it. In layman's term, the feedback is what we call the response. Kevin Berry, the world's famous leadership exponent, mentioned the 4 types of feedback. Let us find out what those are. The first one is what we call the negative feedback, which means the corrective comments about past behavior. Now, negative feedback is also what we call the things that didn't go well while you are speaking or sending a message to the receiver. The second is known as the positive feedback, which means affirming comments about future behavior. These are the things that went well and are needed to be repeated. The third one is what we call the negative feed forward, which means corrected comments about future behavior. The negative feed forward are the things that do not need to be repeated the next time you are speaking or sending a message to the same receiver. And the last one is the positive feed forward, which means affirming comments about future behavior. Positive feed forward are the things that would improve the performance in the future. Those are the 4 types of feedback according to Berry. Now, the 8th element of communication is what we call the context. It is the environment where communication takes place. The word context is actually general in terms of communication process, simply because it can mean the time, the place, or the culture where the people understand one another. The context also poses a relative word or belief, which means that what is wrong with me may be correct with other people, or what is wrong with them may be correct with me. So we have to be careful in looking into the context of every communication process, simply because we have to respect one another's opinions and points of view.
Pop, make it drop, that's some wet ass pussy. Now get a bucket and a mop.
I needed to do that because this is the last element of communication, which is called the barriers. Yeah, rock and roll. Barriers are the factors that obstruct the flow of communication and makes it ineffective. Class, do not be confused because the word barrier is the same with the noise. Barrier and noise can be in the form of emotions. It's what we call the emotional barriers, especially when you are afraid, happy, or sad. There's a different effect in terms of the message. Another is it can be in the physical or semantic barriers. Jargons are part of the semantic barriers. The type of channel that you use can be affected because of the noise or the barrier. That's why you have to look into these different factors that may affect the process of your communication. To recap, the 9 elements of communication are the sender, the message, the encoding, the channel, the decoding, the receiver, the feedback, the context, and the barriers. In the last slide, you will see the communication process, which starts with the sender. The sender is someone who has his thought, an idea, a message, or a concept inside his mind that he wants to convey to the receiver. Now, that thought will be encoded to the way he or she wants to deliver it to the receiver. Once the message or the thought is encoded, the message will go through a certain channel. The channel can be in the form of television, radio, newspaper, mobile phones, etc. Now, once the message has been channeled or delivered, the receiver will then receive the message which came from the sender, and the receiver will interpret or understand or comprehend the message received. And that is what we call the decoding process. Now, there is a shift between the roles of the sender and the receiver. The receiver, upon sending a reply or a feedback, will become the sender. And the sender will become the receiver, who will then receive the feedback or response of the receiver. Now, the noise or the barrier may affect the message, the channel where the message is delivered, and the receiver who understands or interprets the message. Okay? And the context is somehow vague or general that it cannot be determined here in the communication process because it depends. Now remember, the elements of communication shall complete the process itself. If one is not there, it will not be called the complete elements. So everyone here in this process plays a role in communication. And let us also think that balance is important. Okay? Students, that's it for episode 2, lesson 2 of Daily Show. Learn English enthusiastically. Now, students, if you have questions or clarifications, or if you have confusions with the instructions of the module, do not hesitate to communicate or send a message to your teachers. As long as you follow the prescribed schedule of the school. Remember that we want to communicate well with you and might as well communicate well with us. Do not forget to join the Facebook group, The Lee Show, Learn English Enthusiastically, and these videos will also be uploaded on YouTube. Just don't forget to subscribe. You will see the name of my YouTube account here in the credits as you watch till the end. Now, students, thank you for cooperation, and I hope you enjoy the next episodes of The Lee Show. Thank you so much, and good night. I have to edit this one. Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry. Again, my name is PJ Tentenli, and this is The Lee Show. Learn English enthusiastically. And again,